Okay, the purpose of this second presentation, or part two of this introduction to phonetics and phonology, is to talk about a couple of the issues within phonology that kind of get to how phonology can be helpful in understanding language. So we're going to talk about minimal pairs and some phonological processes. As we go through this, I'm going to assume that you are relatively familiar with the IPA characters and that you're reasonably comfortable with them. I don't expect you to have mastered them, but I'll be using those in this presentation. So you'll certainly want to have the IPA chart in front of you. And if anything in here seems to give you problems, then go back and take a look at the exercises or ask me if you have questions about things that aren't making sense. So when we talk about phonology, or at least when we talked about it in the last lecture, I said that phonology studies the sounds which make a difference. And I want to say a little bit more to clarify that now, because all sound differences make a difference, but in what sense is that difference important? So for instance, if you've taken a Spanish class, or you walk into a Spanish class and you see the word para, P-A-R-A, which one of its meanings is for, and you're an English speaker, and you're probably going to pronounce that word para with an aspirated P, that's what that small h indicates, and a very English sounding R, para, right? And that's an acceptable pronunciation, but it's going to sound like you're an English speaker. You'll have an English accent. If you hear a native Spanish speaker saying the word, you'll hear them say something closer to para with an unaspirated P. Notice the aspiration's not there, and also the R is really an alveolar flap, the same thing that we saw in English in words like better and little. Right? Now, the important thing to notice is that the differences between these two pronunciations, para and para, is not a difference in meaning. Both pronunciations mean the same thing. One just makes you sound like you have an accent. So when we talk about phonology studying which sounds make a difference, we really mean the differences in meaning. And that brings us to one of the terms that will become really important, and that is phoneme. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a language that can make a difference in the meaning of a word. So, for instance, an English unaspirated P and an English aspirated P don't make a difference in meaning. So in English, the unaspirated P and the aspirated P, and I'm really exaggerating the aspiration there, but those don't make a difference in meaning. They are not different phonemes. In some languages, they are different phonemes, and I'm making up a word, but you could say pat and pat, and those would be different words with different meanings. Another example of different sounds that may or may not make a phonemic difference is from the movie Lost in Translation, if you've seen that. And if you haven't, you should. It's pretty funny. But there's a scene in which there's a woman who's asking Bill Murray to lip her stockings. And has no idea what she's talking about. He's being confused. The confusion arises because in Japanese, the and the sounds don't make a difference in meaning, and so a word might be pronounced with an or an and that won't change the meaning of the word, whereas of course in English it does. I'll give you a third example of the sorts of sounds that might or might not make a difference. Spanish has no Z sound, and I know you're going to immediately object if you've taken even the first day of a Spanish class. The Spanish language does have an alphabet. The Spanish alphabet does have a letter Z in it. But what I mean is that in Spanish, the S and the Z sound, the voiceless and the voiced alveolar fricatives, don't make a meaningful difference. Spanish has no Z, no voiced alveolar fricative as a phoneme. Just real quick, a couple side notes. You'll see me indicate sounds sometimes in square brackets and sometimes in angle brackets. And the square brackets indicate the actual sounds, the phonetic articulation of a sound. The angle brackets indicate phonemes. That is kind of the idea of the sound in our head. You don't need to be able to use the angle brackets and the square brackets consistently, but I do want you to know what I'm doing so that when you see it, you understand what's going on. Second note, as I indicated, the Spanish alphabet does have a letter Z, but there's no Z phoneme. In fact, the letter in the alphabet is pronounced as zeta, or if you're from Spain, as theta. So there's no zeta. If you say that again, you'll sound like you have an English accent. What this means